Okay. So the first thing is something I've been wanting to cover with you guys since January. I'm going to do my names and uses and how I present the ultimate set. I know there's a lot of area of opportunity on this call for you guys selling more ultimates. And I can tell this just by looking at the numbers, like looking at where you guys are at in sales for the year, which many of you guys are killing it. But I'm just seeing a lot of homemaker, a lot of signature set sales, and percentage-wise, like more of your sales should be ultimate sets. And it's not that hard to sell, but it's something that most of us haven't learned really well in our career through our management or our previous experience. Oftentimes, it's something that we really learn by field training and talking to other CSPs because it's just not a skill set we learn early on. So that's the first main objection, and that's what we're going to go through. Then I want to answer any questions we have for SC2. So Andy gave us a great call last week covering all the marketing and details for that. And I want to make sure that that I answer any questions you have. And then I want to kind of share a little bit about what my plans are for SC2 and kind of how I came about that. I know we have some big goals on the call, and I'm excited to help you guys really make that happen. Well, all right, so let's see if I can get this set up here. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm a little far from the camera. Let me drag it a little bit closer here. Okay, so a couple of things on presenting the ultimate set. A change I made to my demo fairly early on in my career, and we're gonna talk mainly about demos today. I know a lot of you guys do service calls. A lot of this you'll see is very applicable to the service call. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on the homemaker pieces. I'm assuming you guys all know how to sell those really well, but I am gonna show you what I do. When it comes to features and benefits, I typically will pull out the Hardy slicer to cut the rope on my demos. And the reason behind that is, first off, I mean, it just cuts the rope so much nicer than the petite carver does. But also, you know, if you want to sell bigger sets, you should be focusing on the knives that come in the bigger sets. So the Hardy slicer is what I typically will use for my features and benefits and rope cutting. One of the little things that I've found I do fairly well is really creating value in the product by the way I present it to the customer. And so with the Hardy slicer, it's got a great feel and it's got a good heft and weight to it. So I point out the things to my customers, and this applies to gadgets, this applies to anything you're going to present to a client. I present these things and I point out the things I want them to notice before I hand them the knife. So with the Hardy slicer, you know, I'll point out the thickness of the tang, the weight that it has. I let them know it's one of the heaviest knives that we make, and it just has a great feel in the hand. When I hand it to them, I want to let that weight almost fall in their hand. You want to get this sort of a reaction. So you hold it by the end here, you hand it to them handle first, and you want to let that handle fall into their hand. Right away, if you do that properly, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, that feels great. Same thing with the flatware. One of the biggest objections you'll get on flatware is how light it is. So I handle that objection before it comes up. And I let them know one of the nice things about our flatware, Ms. Jones, is that it's super light, very comfortable in the hand without sacrificing quality. Feel how nice and light that is. Doesn't it feel comfortable with that design in your hand? And handling that beforehand will prevent them from saying, oh, but it's so light. So the way you hand a product to the customer, the way you hold it, and the things that you mentioned before they first feel it make a big difference. The other thing I do on my features and benefits page that really helps to set up for the ultimate set and price expectation is I actually go through my price comparison during features and benefits. Now, people have different feelings about this. I'm not telling you guys you have to make this switch in your demo, but it might be something to think about. It saves time as opposed to going through these things twice, because if you're still following the manual, you're going to be going through features and benefits during the features and benefits section, then you kind of review them before the close. And so I'll do basically page 9 in the manual with the price comparison. I do that during features and benefits. And the concept, the way I present it is like, so Ms. Jones, we've talked about the junk knives and the problems with like the cheaper quality brands. Now, if you wanted to go out and get quality, let's take a look at what's out there as far as quality items. And that's when I'll go through Wusthof, Schoon, the guarantee, and my basically price comparison during features and benefits. So that's a little bit before I get to the sets. Now I'm about to present the sets to the customers. And I show them, you know, the sets page. So Ms. Jones, we have 3 main sets. First, we have our basic set. And this is kind of like just the essentials. It's pretty standard. It's what you'll see in most sets. It brings like one of every tool, anything you might need to get by. And in the average kitchen, you know, it's going to cover most of the jobs that you have. And then we have the complete set. Isn't that nice, Miss Jones? And I just let that sit there for a minute, right? I point it out. I let it be quiet. I do the little Vanna White over the set, just like this. This, Miss Jones, this is the best set we make. This is going to come with anything you're going to need in your kitchen for the rest of your life. Now, it's not the biggest set that we make. We do have one that's a little bit larger. It's the full collection. It's basically 2 blocks, and it brings all of our knives. But for the average person, this is going to cover your needs forever. And there's certain tools in there you might not use every day, but over the course of the next 30, 40, 50 years, even if you only use a knife 2-3 times a year, you know, over the next 30 years, that's over 100 times you're going to use that knife. So it really does get value out of it. Plus, it's the only set that brings a full setting of 12 steak knives at the bottom. Most people, if they end up with a smaller set, they have to add the extra table knives anyways, so they have a full setting of 12. So this one's nice because it brings all 12 right on there. You can do the honey block or the cherry block, which is a little bit darker. And we also do the engraving plate on there, so we'll put your name handcrafted for the Perez family or whatever you might want to put on there. And it really just becomes like a piece in the kitchen. It's one of the things people stand out right away when they first walk into your kitchen. They see it, it's gorgeous, and it's just beautiful. I mean, it's the way to go. And then we have one in between the 2 sets. So I'm not going to go through like every knife and every tool for every knife in the set, Ms. Jones, but I'm going to give you some of the highlights from each, and we'll go from there. I'll start with the basic set. So with the basic set, you're going to get, like I said, all your basic tools, things that will come in pretty much any set that you buy anywhere else. And the first one is a paring knife. I'm assuming you know how to use a paring knife, Ms. Jones. So I'm not going to go through names and uses on a paring knife. Understand people that cook, people that own a home, even if they don't cook often, if they own a home, they have a kitchen, they've done some sort of cooking in the past. Typically, they'll have a set of knives. And any set of knives that you order is going to bring a paring knife. So I'll show them the paring knife. I'll say, Ms. Jones, you know how to use a paring knife, right? Excellent. Check that out. What do you notice is different? You have the handle. You have more control when you're peeling and paring. It's a very standard piece, but it's great for all your peeling and prep. Set that down on the table. The next tool in your set, Ms. Jones, is one of my favorites. And this is kind of one of the cool pieces that's very unique to Cutco, and that's our spatula spread. This is not a normal spreader. It's not the kind that you want to lick, okay? You'll cut yourself because it has a cutting edge right on the side here. This is great for sandwiches, brownies, cakes, lasagnas. Anything you're going to cut, scoop, and serve. You know how brownies, when you have that glass pan, it's really hard to get that first piece out of the pan? Well, check out how flexible this is, Ms. Jones. It scoops right in there. You can get that first piece of brownie out, no problem. Ice it, one tool to clean when you're done. Sandwiches, same thing. Cut your meat, spread your mayo, cut the crust off, PB&J. At my house, this thing's like the Nutella knife. I love Nutella. And it's a piece that might take a little bit of getting used to because, to be honest, you've probably been using something like this for those jobs your whole life, right? Just like a standard steak knife. But when you spread with this, Ms. Jones, you never go back. It's really pretty awesome. And my favorite thing, if you look really close right in there, Ms. Jones, you can see one of my future customers. You see him? Yeah, she's pretty good looking, isn't she? So anyways, that's the spatula spreader. Check that out. Hand it to the customer, set it down. Then, Ms. Jones, you have your utility knives. And these are really simple. Basically, like I said, the set's designed to come with anything you need in the kitchen. So you have a small, medium, and large tool. And when you're trying to decide which one to use, as a good rule of thumb, you always want the knife to be about 1 to 2 inches bigger than the food that you're cutting. So the small one, this will probably be the one you use the most. This is the one I grab when I'm doing something I probably shouldn't be doing with the knife, right? Like opening a package or doing something like that. It's a real small, comfortable, versatile tool. Great for cuts about the size of your fist. So like apples, tomatoes, any little cuts like that around the kitchen. Then you have the medium size. That's going to be like rotisserie chickens, pineapples, larger fruits and vegetables. And then your carving knife. And a carving knife comes standard in any set you get. It's definitely not an everyday tool, Ms. Jones. Like most people don't carve a turkey every night, but it's one of those jobs you do, you know, once a month, once every couple of months, birthdays, barbecues, special occasions. So you get the carving set with this really nice fork. And just really carefully, Ms. Jones, touch the point of the fork there. Isn't that super sharp? Yeah, you ever have trouble getting the kids out of bed? Just give them a little poke, they'll jump right out. But you get the carving set. And one of my favorite tools in the set is actually the smaller fork. It's more for everyday stuff. This one's designed to work with the medium tool for like, if you ever get lazy, just pick up a rotisserie chicken at Publix. This is what you'll use to carve it. But this is kind of like the problem solver. It gets the last olive out of the bottom of the drawer, out of the bottom of the jar, I'm sorry. You can use it to turn stuff on the stove. That's why we call it turning fork. It's great for like turning bacon, broccoli, smaller stuff. And it's actually really convenient to have 2 forks in the set, because if you ever need to move around a piece of meat, you can grab it and scoot it around like this. And it's super comfortable to do. So those are some standard pieces that come in the basic set. You also get a bread knife. That's going to be for slicing your bread. And of course, you get a chopping knife. And this is something you'll see in any set you ever buy. I'm sure you'll recognize it, but it's just a chef's knife for chopping your vegetables. You also get a heavy duty knife, and the heavy duty knife is going to be for your tougher cuts. Not the things you necessarily do every day, but if you have something you struggle with, or you want to do squash, frozen foods, bones, tougher stuff, that's what you would use the heavy duty knife for. And I actually don't pull out the butcher knife. And the reason being is the butcher knife, the names and uses can be really duplicated from the for the Hardy slicer and the vegetable knife in the bigger sets. So I'm going to save that butcher knife to the end in case I end up closing on a homemaker. I'll show it to them, or I'll resell them on it. But I really don't bring it out because I find a lot of customers don't connect with the butcher knife quite that well. And they're better tools for that job in the bigger set. And then I do a quick review. So if you see, this is how I have them all laid out, nice and pretty on the table. So basically, Ms. Jones, you get a paring knife, a small, medium, and large utility knife, the spatula spreader for sandwiches and fun stuff, a chopping knife for your vegetables, a bread knife, and then, of course, the heavy-duty knife I mentioned as well. Pretty standard, pretty small. So let's pause right there. Feedback, thoughts, questions. Is that similar to what you guys are doing, or is that revolutionary and different? Please.
Yo, so when you explain the 3 sets, man, like one of the main things I took from it, how you went from basic to complete, then back to we just have one in between. I really like that verbiage, and just a lot of like your little phrases you use for the ultimate set. Dude, I'm excited this call is recorded so I can go back and listen to it again. But the way that you teed it up at the beginning, even though I introduced 3 sets, I like your verbiage better for the 3 sets.
Yeah, and the philosophy behind that is like the signature set is such an easy set to sell because of the tools that come in it. It's like a really easy close. And if you promote it too much up front, then it's like, oh, that's all I need. I can get by with that, right? People get really excited about the signature set too early in the appointment. The signature set, I save it for the end. I almost present it as though there's 2 sets, the basic and the complete. And then if I need to drop down, that's when the signature set comes out, and I'll sell the signature set hard in the close. But at this point in the presentation, I really just kind of downplay the signature set. It's just one in between. I don't spend a lot of time talking about it. I'll go there at the end to upsell them from the homemaker. Because when you present it this way, most of the times when you ask them which set they like best, they're going to pick either the basic or the complete. Very rarely do they ever pick the signature set because of the way I present it, right? So that allows me to then, if they pick the basic set, upsell them to a signature. If they pick the complete set and the price isn't right, then I can drop down to the signature. And I think that's really a big, big, big key point to selling ultimate sets, is the way you present the signature set at this point. Other feedback, things you liked?
I love how you talk about kind of like the ultimate collection, and it kind of makes the complete set look smaller, even though you're calling it the best set. And then it's going to cover all the cooking needs you might ever have the rest of your entire life. You still leave it open to sell them, the ultimate collection with the 2 blocks, and you paint that picture. It really makes you make that complete set look smaller, and I love that.
And in my blue book, I actually have 2 pictures with customers that have the full collection. So they have an ultimate and a homemaker block. So I've already mentioned that. Usually during rapport, I'll point that out in the picture. And to be honest, I mean, how often do I ever sell that? Super rare. Most of the times, if I'm selling a Santoku homemaker, which is basically a homemaker set with the knives that don't come in the ultimate, it's on a service call. It's an upgrade later on. You can sell it all together, but just presenting the fact there's something about them knowing that there's a bigger option that they're not going with that makes them more comfortable going with the ultimate set. So I always mention that as well. All right, so I think that's good for the basic tools. Then I move on to the signature pieces, or the ultimate pieces. So Ms. Jones, that's the basic set. And like I said, you can see how it's pretty standard, just kind of brings the essentials that any set would bring. Now in the complete set, you get a couple of really cool pieces. The first one is the Florida paring knife. I call it the Florida paring knife because down here we do a lot of mangoes and avocados, the bigger fruits and vegetables. And so with this guy, it's much easier to do a mango because of the length. Also, as opposed to like this little paring knife, right, you can actually do some slicing on like the cutting board if you want to slice an apple or something, whereas this one's just a little too small for most of the slicing. This one's really mostly for peeling, like cuts in the air, whereas the 4-inch is a little bit more versatile. But also the paring knife tends to be the first one to dole out in the set because it's so small, so having 2 of them just makes them last a lot longer. So that's your 4-inch paring knife. Now, one of the tools that I never understood why it comes in the complete set and not in the basic set is the boning knife. And this is a raw meat knife. And everybody cuts raw meats, so I don't get why it's not in the smaller set, but it's kind of a necessity. This is great for butterflying chicken breast, taking fats off of meats, any raw meat prep you're gonna be doing, this is the tool you wanna grab. It also has a little bit of flex, and I'll flex it on the cutting board, so you can do some smaller fillets with it if you wanted to as well. But this is a great tool for all your raw meat cuts. Ms. Jones, do you ever do any fishing or salmon or fillets? They say yes. Great, Ms. Jones. We have our salmon knife. This is going to be the most flexible tool we make. Isn't that cool? If they don't do a lot of those cuts, then I say me neither. I actually don't eat fish. This is still one of my favorite knives. And the reason is it's the longest knife we make with a straight edge on it. And it's great for slicing meat super thin. Like if you ever want to get a Philly cheesesteak style cut on your meat, maybe like a brisket, this does an excellent job. Also, even on raw meats, like if I have a big flank steak or churrasco with that layer of fat on the top, I'll use this and I'll just drag it through and get the fat off. And I really want you to notice like the motion that I'm making with my hand, how I'm literally, as I'm explaining the type of cut, I mime the cut with my hand to make it real and so they can see exactly how that would work. So you have a salmon knife for your fillets and for your for bigger raw meats, also briskets, you're slicing meat super thin. The next tool in the set, Ms. Jones, is actually one of my favorites. And it's Cutco's #1 selling knife. And this is, have you ever seen a knife like this, Ms. Jones? Yeah, it's called a cheese knife. Can you guess what those holes are for? So that the food doesn't stick to the blade. And it's not just good for cheese. There's a, it wouldn't be our #1 selling knife if it was just made for cheese. It actually does a great job on tomatoes, potatoes, anything sticky, starchy, or soft and squishy. It does a really good job of cutting because the food doesn't stick to the blade. If it's on a service call, I'll have them take their trimmer and I'll have them cut a potato. Potato is probably the only vegetable I'll bring with me on an appointment. And I'm going to show you guys how I cut with the cheese knife on here. So if they don't, then I'll still grab my trimmer, which is new, and I make sure to point out this is new, super sharp. Give me a cut on the tomato, on the potato, and I'll have them slice it. Did you notice, first off, wasn't that much sharper than any of the knives you have, Ms. Jones? I hate to just so you know, like obviously, yeah, it's sharp. So this is a cool tool, but in the complete set, you get the cheese knife. Now try this one. I have them cut with it. Give me a couple slices. Isn't that nice and smooth? Now, if I didn't bring a potato, or if they don't have a potato, an apple is a good substitute. It cuts an apple really well. Now, if you ever do hash browns, French fries, sweet potato fries, one of the things I love about this knife is it doesn't have a blade on the tip here, so it slides really nicely on the cutting board. And you can almost use it as a mandolin. You just shred up your cuts like this. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? It also cuts just straight down. So you can cut forward, backwards, straight down with it. You can drag through if you want to julienne peppers or do an onion or something like that. You can get these little nice clean cuts. Why don't you try that, Ms. Jones? Drag through and show them how to slice with the knife. So the cheese knife is an excellent, excellent tool. It's our #1 selling knife, and it does come in the complete set. Now, I find that cutting a potato on service calls especially is really huge. It's just there's nothing you can do to portray that type of energy. But also it lets you break up your names and uses. It gives you a chance to cut, change up the energy, slow it down. It's a great opportunity to connect with the customer and sometimes talk. And they'll say, oh man, that's great. I usually struggle with this. This would be really good on that. Oh, this would probably cut this really well. I'm like, yeah, Ms. Jones, it's awesome. So the cheese knife. And then, now, I'm not allowed to have favorite knives, Ms. Jones. They're like my kids. I have to love them all the same. But if I was stuck on an island and I could only take one with me, it would probably be this guy. This is the one we used to cut the rope earlier. It's called the Hearty Slicer. On pepperonis, ribs, bones, squashes, tough stuff, anything you want to like muscle through, like a sweet potato that you just got to kind of muscle through, and I do that motion with the knife, it is a beast. I mean, there's nothing that this knife can't cut. It's a really, really great tool. And like I said, it's one of my favorites. I know you already felt the weight of it, but it's a pretty cool piece. The cleaver, sometimes I pull it out, sometimes I don't. I call it the matavaca, the cow killer. It's just a nickname that Cubans will use for this style knife. But I show them the cleaver. Miss Jones, this is also great on seafood. You can use the back end here to crack open like something with a tougher outer shell. Or if you do a coconut, you can use the back to crack the coconut first, then you flip it over, use the front to finish it off. It's a really fun piece. It's great if your husband ever gets out of line on you. Take care of him. But I'll be honest, you know, it's definitely not an everyday piece. This is the one I was talking about before that you might only use a couple times a year. But the concept, again, with the complete set is not that you're going to use every knife every day, because nobody's going to use every knife every day. The idea is, first off, they stay sharp for so long because you have so many, so you don't have to sharpen them very often. Anytime one of your favorite knives goes dull, you can grab another one out of the set, start to use that. And still, even a piece that you only use a few times a year, over the course of the rest of your life, like you're going to use it over 100 times. So it's definitely worth having. And it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And that's kind of the concept of the complete set. So you get the cleaver. And the last thing that comes in the complete set are the extra chopping knives. Now, chopping vegetables is the most time-consuming job in the kitchen. It also tends to be the most difficult for a lot of times. So in the basic set, you get this big, long chef's knife. And this thing is great for chopping large quantities of vegetables. That's why it's so big. And I'll put it on the cutting board. I'll show them. Look at all the surface area that you can cover. So when you're doing soup, stew, or stir fry, anything you want to chop up really small, you can chop big quantities of vegetables much quicker with a long tool like this. But for everyday stuff, if you're just doing something for you and the husband or a smaller salad for lunch, this is my everyday chopper. It's called the Santoku knife. And this is kind of like the hip and happening knife right now. If you ever watch the Food Network, you'll see this style knife all the time. It comes from Japan, and again, it's called the Santoku knife. And Santoku stands for slice, mince, and dice. So it does 3 different style cuts, as opposed to the chef knife, which is used strictly like this, in that up and down motion to chop over your veggies. With the Santoku knife, you can do the same thing where you chop, and I'll have them feel it. Do you feel this rock's a little bit nicer? It definitely has a better feel when you're doing this motion. But you can also slice because it's got that lifted point on the end. So if you want to julienne pepper or slice through some cuts, you can do this motion with it. And you can chop up and down with it as well because of the shape of the blade. That edge here is exposed, so you can chop in an up and down motion with it. So this is actually the one I probably use the most in my set when I'm actually cooking a meal for chopping. But obviously you have a family. I know you said you and your husband cook together sometimes. So there's so many vegetables to chop. It's always good to have an extra chopping knife. And that just helps speed up the process because you can have 2 people chopping at once. So that's the Santoku knife. And the last knife that comes in the set is going to be the vegetable knife. This is actually called a nikiri knife. It's another Asian style knife. And this is more like a cleaver, but for your vegetables. This is unbelievable on squash. That's the main thing I use it for at home. I mean, it does a lot more than squash, but butternut squash, acorn squash, it's got this flat top, so you can literally get 2 hands on the knife and just push right through that tougher squash. You also get this little elevated tip here, which I'll use. It comes to a point to get into the squash at the beginning and then just chop down through the bottom. You can also slice with it like we did with the Santoku knife. Now, it doesn't rock quite as well because it's flat, but it will do that rocking motion. And then you can chop up and down. This is the chopping knife that you'll see at Benihana's, or if you go to one of those stir-fry places where they cook in front of you, because they chop up and down on all the vegetables and then they scoop. And it's got this really wide blade to move vegetables around with. So if you ever do a stir-fry or a salsa, chop up like this, scoop, transfer stuff. Really, really great tool for those types of cuts. But mainly on squashes, sweet potatoes, carrots, the heavier vegetables, this is the one that I grab. And the vegetable knife, because it gets so much use when you're chopping vegetables, that's why the complete set brings a couple of different options. And that way, with the extra options, you know, they just stay sharper longer because you have, you know, so many of them. So with the complete set, again, you get 2 extra chopping knives, 1 for heavy duty stuff, 1 for everyday chopping. You get the bad boy cleaver, the fillet knife, also good for meats and briskets, the raw meat knife, and the boning knife. The only one I didn't pull out is you do get a smaller bread knife, which is nice for serving. If you ever want to serve, like cut the bread at the table, because the bread knife's just so long, so you get a shorter version in there as well. And then, of course, we have the cheese knife and the heavy duty knife. Now, I left these 2 out here because these 2 actually come in the family set. The family set is just the basic tools plus the these 3 extra knives here. And instead of the full-size chopper, you get like a little baby chopper like this in here. So that's like the in-between set there. All right, so let's stop there. Let's get some feedback on this. Feedback on the complete pieces.
All right, cool. A couple of things I got. Number 1 was boning knife. That is something that I build tons of value in. Most of my customers want, but I just liked your verbiage when you were teeing it up, where you're like, I don't even know why this doesn't come in the basic set, because like everybody cuts raw meat. So I like that. I like what you do right there at the end with the petite santoku, where you're like, you put a lot of value in the 7-inch santoku, and then said, yeah, and then you know, you get the baby one that comes with the family set, because like, I mean, that's one that people will naturally be drawn to. Right. So like, I'd never thought about more value in the 7-inch santoku, and then I mean, like just having that one there, because if they like it, they'll like it naturally.
Not only that, you know, when it comes to closing, if I need to close on a signature, I'll spend time building value in the baby chopper, and I'll also maybe put the smaller chef knife. Notice how I pull out the French chef, and that's what I pitch in the homemaker tool, because it really tees up for the 7-inch, right? If you have 2 7-inch chopping knives that you're showing them, it seems almost repetitive. Whereas when you pull out the French chef, which by the way is an awesome tool, and I really do love the French chef. Like if I had to pick between the French and the petite chef, I would pick the French chef all day. But most customers would tend to prefer the smaller one. And that's why I show them the big one, so to kind of tee up the 7-inch Santo. Other feedback on the complete and the way I presented them.
I love how you're strategically reminding the customer that, well, yeah, you know, you bust it out on the clear when you say, well, obviously, Mrs. Jones, this is not a knife you're going to use every day. But by the way, like, you're not going to use every knife in your complete set every day. That's not the point of the complete set. It's a great way to handle that objection. The whole, like, well, I don't think I'd use that many pieces. Mm-hmm. You're handling it before they even bring it up. I love that.
And you want to be careful with that, right? I notice, like, I don't actually have a customer in front of me. I'm always tailoring this to the customer. So I'm going to use that phrase on any of the tools or on the tool that I feel they connect with the least, right? So there's always in the complete set going to be a handful of tools they don't feel like they're going to use. But you're selling them on the concept of having the complete set, not on the individual knives that come in it. So if I feel resistance or pushback on a specific piece, that's when I'll pull out that line. And you do want to be careful, like you don't want to say that on every knife, right? You don't want to be constantly putting that at the front of the conversation, because maybe that customer is not even thinking about that. Maybe they love that piece, but now you just put that energy out. You just put that as a possibility for an objection that they could give you at the end. So I would say use that line with caution. It is powerful. It works super well and it makes sense, but you know, you want to be careful with how you use it.
Yeah, I got one more, Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed one thing is like you tee as a benefit up plenty of times, like of the complete set, that when they have more tools, like if one's kind of doling out over time, they can reach for another one, and they've got plenty of options, and the more options they have, like the longer they'll all stay sharp. Like, so obviously that could be a bad thing too. So like, where do you tee up in your demo, like how long the knife stays sharp for?
So the guarantee page is obviously when I tell them how long it stays sharp. And I always tell them, talking about the longevity of the knives, I pitch it from the beginning. I'm like, you know, it all depends on how many you have and how often you use them. So typically with the small set, you're going to want to get them sharpened every 2 to 3 years. With the complete set though, like you can go 5-6 years without sharpening them, sometimes even more. And it's always a good because you want them to want to get it sharpened, right? You want to have the opportunity to go back and service them. The truth is the set will stay sharp for 10, 15, 20 years. and especially if they have a complete set, we've all met customers that have sharpened them in 20 years. Now they probably need it sooner, and I'm not saying that that's ideal. However, you know, I will always tell them that how long the set stays sharp depends on which set you get. If you buy one knife, it's not going to stay as sharp as long as the basic set, and obviously the basic set's not going to stay as sharp as long as the complete set. So part of the reason people get the complete set stays sharp, you know, for longer than any of the other ones because you have more tools in there. This is a concept for people that don't want to, like, Cutco is about not having to worry, right? It's about just getting it and being done. You don't want to waste any mental energy having to sharpen your knives, worrying when you go to grab it if it's sharp, having to sharpen it yourself, dealing with the frustration of a dull knife. With the complete set, you're good. Like, you're not going to have to sharpen this thing for 6 years. And to be honest, and sometimes I'll even share this story during rapport at other times. Like, I even have a couple customers that they don't even care like what the knives are for. They just grab one knife and they'll use that knife till it's dull, and they grab the next knife in the set, and they'll use that knife for like weeks and weeks and months until it's dull, and then they grab the next. Now, I don't recommend that, but you do have that option when you have a set like the complete set because you have so many tools. And keep in mind that I'm balancing this with who's making, like, one of the things you said at the beginning is I made the sets seem small, right? And I probably went into more detail on these names and uses than I might even do with a client. I'm going to always spend more time on certain tools and less time on others depending on the customer. Another thing that I do is I usually put away my blue book at this point, and I'll just pull out this page. So I pop this out of my blue book and I set it on the table here. So you can see kind of like what my table looks like. So you have, put that up there. So you have the homemaker pieces in classic, the pearl pieces are the complete set, and then the signature pieces are at the bottom there with the 3 set pictures. So it's super clear. Like, there's no question as to what comes in which set when you present it that way. So the only other thing we didn't cover is the difference between the steak knife and the table knife. I think you guys know how to pitch that and utilize that to close the bigger sets, get them excited about the steak knife. The concept of the cutting boards and the block, especially on upgrades. You know, my upgrades come with a sharpener, 3 cutting board, a sharpener, a cutting board, and the block. It's always calculated in the price of an upgrade. And I pitch them on the value of having a Cutco cutting board. It's a big thing that helps me close the set. It seems silly, and it's not something we put a lot of energy towards because it's a $30 piece, but it helps with the longevity of the knives. And the overall customer experience is better when they're storing the knives in a block and they're using the proper cutting board. And I tell them that. One of the lines I use a lot in my appointments is, Miss Jones, I'm all about my customers having the best experience with whatever they get. Obviously, my job is to sell you everything in the book, but the biggest thing that I'm most concerned about is that whatever you do get, you know how to use it, you love it so much that you want to order more in the future. So there's 3 big things that I push all my customers to have. This is typically on a service call more so than a demo. This helps me to tee up the upgrade. So the first thing, Ms. Jones, is having a block to store them in. When you have loose knives in the drawer, they clang around against one another, they dull out, you can cut yourself, and they just don't stay sharp that long. This is like the Rolls Royce of cutlery. If you had a Rolls Royce, you wouldn't park it out on the curb, right? You got to keep that in the garage, keep it covered, keep it in good shape. So having a block, not only that, but more so for me, it's like when they're out on the counter, you use them more. And if you're going to make an investment like this, you want to use your stuff as often as possible. And just having them handy on the counter makes a world of difference in using them. I find when they're in the drawer, people tend to grab the same one every time, and they don't get the full use out of their set. So the block is the first big thing that I push all my customers to get. The second thing are the cutting boards. Cutting on glass, granite, or even bamboo and wood is really not good for the knives. It takes away the edge. The wood is not the most sanitary or the cleanest. And it's the number one thing that dulls the knife is not the food you're cutting. Most of the food you're cutting is pretty soft. Like a tomato is not really going to dull your knife that much. What is going to dull your knife are other things that the knife comes in contact with, like the cutting surface, china plates, glass cutting boards, being loose in the drawer and hitting other knives. That's the biggest reason knives dull. So the Cutco cutting boards are great because they take the impact. They're going to get little cuts in them because they're absorbing the impact when you're slicing them. Now, the only problem with soft cutting boards like this, although they do keep the knives razor sharp, they wear out. Like, it's just inevitable. A glass cutting board is going to last you forever because it's so hard it's never gonna, wear out, but it's also gonna wear out your knives. Soft ones, you're gonna have to replace them every like 5-7 years. But the great thing about Cutco, Ms. Jones, we replace them for you for free. You literally never have to buy another cutting board again. Every 5-10 years, mail them back, and they send you a brand new one free of charge. You can also bleach them if you ever do like chorizo or mango or pineapple, anything that stains them. Bleach it, let the bleach sit for like 10-15 minutes on there, and then dishwash them to sanitize it, and it's like a brand new board. It's awesome. So having the cutting boards will really increase your experience. And then the third thing is a sharpener. And you're not going to be sharpening your knives every day. That's why you buy Cutco. But the truth is the straight edges, they don't stay as sharp as long as the ones with the teeth. And everybody has their 2 or 3 favorite knives. So your 2 or 3 favorite knives, something like the paring knife, it's small, it's comfortable, you use it every day, but it's really short. It's going to be the first one to go in the set. I want you to be able to just give it 3 or 4 passes through the sharpener a couple times a year. Keep it nice and sharp. You'll have a better experience with the product. So having the block, the cutting boards, and the sharpener just enhances your overall experience with the product. And they're the cheapest items that we make. When you do the upgrade, the great thing about it is you get the cutting board and the sharpener for free, plus you get a discount on the block. Or if it's a demo, the great thing about the sets is they come with the cutting boards and the sharpener for free as a part of the set. I think that's something people don't put enough value in when they're presenting the upgrade or the sets is the cutting board, the block, and the sharpener.
That was awesome, bro.